So, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm here with Claire Lopez. That's our second talk, and we're going to be talking about the state of the world today. We want to look at the state of global terrorism, emerging threats, and how these threats are expressing themselves, how these movements are expressing themselves through social movements in the West. So, thank you very much, Claire, for joining us. How are you today?
Thanks for having me, Lloyd. Very glad to be back with you and your audience.
Yeah, no, it's a great honor to have you with me. Yeah, my channel has been growing really well, and it's starting to gain traction even on X. And I see you do post on X,
Mhm.
and I think social media is where people are finding news, finding truth, where the major media is largely failing us. Um, your thoughts? I mean, the world is in a precarious place right now, and I think we're struggling to find truth. We're struggling to find honest reporting. Your thoughts on the state of the world today.
Well, let me start with your intro there about free speech, and I'm looking at Britain in particular, where you've got the authorities now actually threatening and actually locking up people in jail for posts on social media, and threatening as an American, threatening to extradite Americans to Britain to be put in jail for posts on social media if the British government doesn't approve of them. This is unbelievable to me. And all the more reason I think we're very happy about the way things turned out back in 1776 and forward.
Yeah, I just wish we had the same fighting spirit and the same hard lines in the sand, which people are more tolerant today. And I think this is not necessarily a good thing. I think we need to have, shall we say, more greater discernment and be more willing to say no to things. We just before we went live, we were talking about the Muslim Brotherhood. They in their manifesto, and I've covered this on my channel before, and I know you've spoken about it, they do say that within their plan, they will have the West kill itself by its own miserable hand. So are they the invisible puppet master that has engineered and orchestrated this and helped, along with the socialists, to create this climate of nihilism, this climate of doom, of weather's going to kill us, and for people to hate their own culture so that they will accelerate this process?
Well, there certainly is what we've talked about before, and I certainly have as well as written about the red green axis, right? So, red being the forces of communism and Marxism today, I think dominated and led by the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing. The
Mm-hmm.
green, Islam, the Islamic movement, for which the Muslim Brotherhood is a very big part, organized with many front groups in the West, certainly in the United States, which collude directly with the forces of the red. Now you'll say, well, these are very different ideologies, and certainly they are. But at the moment, their number one objective, which is the destruction of Western civilization, and in particular the United States, our republic, those objectives, that objective, aligns for the two, the red and the green. And we can see this certainly in the United States, of course, where I live. Um, we can see this playing out on our streets in protests and demonstrations where you can see, placards and banners and posts, great big, posts online at their various websites too. The communist force is very open about who they are and what they represent. Revolutionary Communist, RevCom USA, World Workers Party, on and on. Freedom Road Socialist Organization. In the same ranks and marches and demonstrations as the Muslim Brotherhood front groups like CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations, ISNA, Islamic Society of North
Mm-hmm.
America, MAS, Muslim American Society, MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs, on and on, right? Um,
Right.
and I would point to a couple of examples of this if folks want to take a look. Go back to January of this year, 2024, and there was a big demonstration in downtown Washington, D.C., mid-January of this year, that began in the afternoon at a place called Freedom Plaza, which is on Pennsylvania Avenue in downtown Washington, D.C. And it was entitled online, and here's the website, marchforgaza.org, March numeral 4, Gaza.org.
Mm-hmm.
And the important part about that is if you go to that website, which is still up, that protest, by the way, turned violent as darkness fell, and the rioters tried to assault the White House, but there had been a big fence erected around the entire property, so that held. But look at the website.
It's not violence when it's the left doing it. It's simply the frustration and the speech of the unheard.
Yeah, but look at the website, and there's a button there where you can go to look at the signatories, the various groups that were in support of that March for Gaza. Even though all of them were not present that day, there are over 350 in the list, and it's a who's who of the communist Marxist groups in America and the Muslim Brotherhood front groups in America. Fast forward to another protest just a few weeks ago, again in downtown Washington, D.C., and this was on the occasion of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to a joint session of Congress there in Washington, D.C. And again, a who's who of lefty communist Marxist affiliates, which I think were actually more numerous than I would have expected. And then, of course, the who's who again, Muslim Brotherhood, jihadi types, but they were far fewer than I had expected. I was there that day with some buddies downtown there all day. So we saw these, but those are the two examples that come to mind of the red-green axis. And go have a look at those websites and lists of names of organizations, and you'll see what I mean.
Right. Really interesting. I mean, the conspicuous absence of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden at the visit of Netanyahu, was quite telling. Briefly, just what do you think that bodes for the future and for the attitude of the administration towards the West, towards Israel, and to appeasing the Muslim lobby?
As we know now, President Joe Biden is no longer a candidate for re-election in the presidential election of this year in November. But Kamala Harris, his vice president, and currently serving still, is a candidate along with her chosen vice presidential running mate, Governor Tim Walz of the state of Minnesota. And so we have a situation now, as you were alluding to, in the world that is on a tipping point. I mean, up against a crisis. As listeners may know, tonight, sundown, begins the Jewish people's commemoration of Tisha B'Av, which is the sad and sorrowful commemoration beginning tonight, as I said, at sundown into tomorrow, a day, a 24-hour day of fasting and recollecting the tragedies that have befallen the Jewish people, beginning with the destruction of both the first and the second temples, and many more tragedies after that. But the timing that we're at right now on the precipice with the Islamic Republic of Iran's regime threatening to attack Israel, many analysts believing that attack could begin even tonight, the sundown beginning of Tisha B'Av, and be a combination of attacks directly from Iran against Israel, as well as from Hezbollah out of Lebanon against Israel. Now we have to see what will happen. It may or may not occur on this commemorative date, a very important date on the Jewish calendar, the 9th day of the month of Av. But we shall see about that. But the point that I'd really like to make is that apparently the United States government, yes, the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris administration, lame ducks though they are, still in office for a few more months, have been surging U.S. military assets to the Middle East region, to include two USS aircraft carriers, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which is already in the region, the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is heading towards the Middle East from where it had been out in the Far East, not expected to arrive in the Middle East until perhaps later this week. But also a nuclear-powered submarine announced by our Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, headed to the region. F-22 Raptor jets headed to the region, and a surge in personnel.
I have a question
as well.
there. I see a little bit of a potential dichotomy. You've got the escalation, you've got the buildup of troops, which is a good thing, obviously. So deterrence through strength. On the other hand, you don't hear the words from the administration. You don't hear clear no's. You don't hear clear.
Well, Joe Biden did say don't. I mean, I heard him. He said don't.
Don't. That's really clear. Is that strategic ambiguity, or is that just a lack of
It's
diction?
what he said the last time that an Iranian attack was imminent against the Jewish state of Israel. That was back in April, over the night of 13-14 April of this year, 2024. And it didn't really seem to have much effect because the attack took place anyway. But, I mean, thankfully, to recall, the attack was repulsed, and some 300 different kinds of projectiles, rockets, missiles, drones, were stopped before reaching Israeli airspace.
Is it possible this administration is afraid of, and we've seen them want to appease the Muslim voting bloc, as they do in the UK, same in the US. So they, on the one hand, they want to appease them and maintain them as a voting bloc. On the other hand, they realize on a practical level, this is going to go bad. They have to ramp up their military presence in the Middle East. But do you see them ultimately playing appeasement, and eventually appeasement always fails?
Well, certainly appeasement has been the theme of this administration towards Iran since it took office. And I don't think that the desire for that, the desire for appeasement, the desire to, incorporate Iran into the regional order of things, I don't think that has changed. But, however, I'll point to a recent report within the last couple of days only, and that is a report that comes out of the United States intelligence community, actually published through a spokesman who said that the U.S. intelligence community no longer holds to its prior assessment that the Islamic Republic of Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program and is working on it. In other words, they've gone back on prior assessments, just publicly at least, in the last couple of days, implying that the assessment now of the U.S. intelligence community is that, yes, indeed, Iran's regime is working on deliverable nuclear weapons. Now, what that announcement purports to convey behind the scenes, what must be going on in the intelligence community, to me, I think they're at panic stations. I think that's part of the reason why the surge of so many U.S. powerful forces, aircraft carriers, submarine forces, F-22s to the region is going on, not just because of the threat of the Iranian attack against Israel, going back based on the takedown in Tehran of the Hamas political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, a couple of weeks ago, almost now, I guess. So I don't think it's only that. I think that something has changed behind the scenes in terms of intelligence and analysis, probably intelligence and analysis shared by both Israel and the United States, but I think it very much has to do with the Iranian nuclear weapons program.
Okay. Do you think there's a possibility they'll conduct a strike on the nuclear weapons facility where the weapons are manufactured or stored before they can be delivered? Because the great Satan and the little Satan are now targets.
Well, we certainly have heard, repeated statements from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, from his Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, and other ranking senior members of the Israeli government, repeatedly saying they will not allow a nuclear Iran. And why? Just as you say there, Lloyd, because Israel is the Shaitan Kuchek. That means in Farsi, the little Satan, and the United States is the Shaitan Bazork. That means the big Satan. And they know, Israel knows that it would be the first target, not the only target. We, the United States, and the West more generally, we are the ultimate target. But for the immediate future right now, the target is Israel. But Israel has the means to defend itself.
Right.
And it will not allow, as they've said repeatedly, it will not allow Iran to go nuclear.
Understood. I have some questions on topical issues right now, and this is based on my own survey of obviously my audience, but also looking at current events and the kind of pressing questions that people are asking around the world, the things that people are concerned about. What new threats are emerging? Because we're not just looking at kinetic warfare, you're not just looking at land warfare with tanks, you're looking at all sorts. This is you're looking at a multi-spectrum threat. They're attacking culture, they're attacking history, they're attacking schools. We know the Muslim Brotherhood's pumping their money, especially through Qatar, who is an almost unknown, unseen, but really, really active threat, with how they are promoting terrorism, hiding terrorists in their country, accommodating them, funding them, assisting them, and collaborating with them. But what new threats are emerging? And especially you look at the risk now to public events. Taylor Swift had to cancel concerts in Vienna because of a mass casualty event that was being planned by Muslims. And not only that, she had to cancel other concerts because there was more than one attack planned, apparently. So your thoughts on what threats are emerging, and these attacks to cancel large public events is a cancellation of Western culture. It creates mass fear, and this, of course, inhibits action, creates inaction, and it demoralizes the West. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I am focused especially on Iran right now, and I'll mention the cyber threat. We had Microsoft coming out within the last just couple of days, again, talking about a hacking attack that targeted the Trump campaign, and apparently the Iranian hackers, so identified by Microsoft, targeted with a phishing technique against a senior member of the Trump campaign, and obtained somehow a couple hundred-page dossier of related to the vetting process for J.D. Vance, Ohio senator, now named as Trump's running mate, vice presidential running mate for this presidential election. Now, that dossier was not classified or anything like that, but the ability, the intent and the ability and the success of Iranian hackers to get into that database has to be of concern. We know that the Iranians are inside of our critical infrastructure, meaning the electric grid, meaning water pipes, pumping stations, meaning oil and gas pipelines, and so forth, many more. We've known for a decade that the Iranians were already capable of being inside that critical infrastructure, 17 or maybe it's 18 elements of it. Chinese
on that point,
are inside that critical infrastructure. And both Iran and China have numerous agents inside the United States. We know that there
Now,
are Iranian hit teams inside the
there
United
was
States.
a report that China is going to start activating cells. And then also disturbingly, there's a report that's come out that an Iranian was captured with the intent to conduct an assassination against President Trump.
That was a
However,
Pakistani, actually,
a Pakistani, sorry, but
but with Iranian
but
connections.
the
Yes,
FBI gave him special permission to enter the country, apparently assisted that, even though he was on a terror watch list. Can we trust the FBI? Has the FBI been compromised?
pretty hard to trust them now at this point, isn't it? But yes, that particular individual, again, a Pakistani agent operating on behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran, was arrested July 12th. That is the day before the Trump rally held in Butler, Pennsylvania, where President Trump, narrowly avoided escaped assassination. And so on that topic as well, what other agents of Iran are inside this country? We know they've had agents here ever since then President Trump, back in January of 2020, ordered the hit against Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani.
Mm-hmm.
We've known that there have been hit teams here, and because of that, extra protection, security protection has been given since that time to former National Security Advisor and also former Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, former Defense Secretary Mark Esper, former CIA Director, as well as former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and others, and Trump himself.
Right.
So we know that there are Iranian agents inside the United States. I have written and talked about Thomas Crooks, the 20-year-old shooter that almost assassinated President Trump that day in Pennsylvania, and the possibility. You've named some of the other threats out there. Let me get to Islamic State, but Islamic State, one of them, China, one of them, Iran, one of them, Russia, one of them, that operate, again, online. And they operate to recruit, to influence, often anonymously. The targets don't know that they're being targeted by Iran, for example,
Mm-hmm.
But through gaming sites, gaming apps online are very, very actively used by all of the above I just named. Question mark whether Thomas Crooks could have been lured into an influence operation in that way. Don't
So
know.
that's an interesting cultural vector. That's very unusual. So that is
Yeah.
really interesting. Yeah, there's so many things. Well, I mean, this is so we could go deep into any one topic, but I'd like to sort of explore a number of topics, and we like a little jigsaw puzzle, so that I try to cover as many topics as possible to give people an understanding of the diverse landscape that we're dealing with here. Um, yeah, because the whole Thomas Crooks thing, looking at that, I was ex-security. I look at the litany of failures and the fact that no one was fired, no one's reprimanded. That is shocking to me. Having worked security, having worked events, there were too many errors to be just, yeah,
Complete, total criminal negligence is the way I would
negligence. Yeah,
characterize it.
yeah, because I want to be careful
I
with my
do mean
words.
criminal negligence. That
I
level,
agree.
um,
I agree. I agree.
unbelievable.
There's far too many questions there. But I mean, I don't want to get conspiracy theory like, because I worked in the world of when I built security systems, multi-million-dollar systems for critical infrastructure and so on. I had worked as an engineer, and I worked with facts. I worked with probabilities. I don't want to work on, there's
Well,
enough crazy information out there.
you probably know that many of our, for example, high voltage electric transformers have Chinese sourced elements within them that can be
Not good.
remotely activated by
When
AI. We know
when
that.
we were supplying, when I was building these systems for the Middle East, I mean, we were overseen by the State Department, and of course, I had to be vetted by the State Department and permitted to work on US classified articles, right? Weapon systems and such. We discovered that our factory in Malaysia, we were producing servers there, some of our servers, And we discovered that our Dell servers were compromised by the Chinese. They were embedding chips on the board.
Oh, yeah.
And these chips could be remotely, well, technically, these systems are not meant to be remotely accessed. They're meant to be cut off, and you operate, the military operates them or the government operates them locally, right? And they just have a local network. But for whatever reasons, not everyone follows protocol. And we discovered these systems could be remotely accessed and controlled or destroyed by the Chinese,
This
or
is
they
what
could
we're
steal
talking
information.
about. High voltage
We
electric
were,
transformers across the United States.
Mhm.
Chinese components.
Yeah, we were forced to very strictly manufacture either in Canada or the US, and every component had to be vetted.
Too late. It's too late. They're already embedded across our
You
electric.
know, yeah, no, in that sense. I mean, we had to recall a lot of machines, replace motherboards, and it was a bit panic stations at the time when I worked in that field. Just to change topics, because I mean, there's so many paths to go down, but I want to get through a list of questions that I think are topical and burning issues, burning questions for people. But was the withdrawal from Afghanistan, did that have an impact on the global terrorism landscape? I mean, leaving 60,000 vehicles, millions of bullets, hundreds of thousands of guns, and so on. Did that change things in any appreciable way, or was?
I mean, in an incredible way. And it's not just from the kinetic or the physical leaving behind of all this top level equipment and weaponry and ceding Bagram Air Force Base to the Chinese. It's
Weakness.
not just that, but it's the perception of the United States. This was August of 2021 when the Biden administration so chaotically fled the battlefield, ceding it, allowing it to fall into the hands of the Taliban, leaving Americans behind. Of course, our 13 American service members killed by a suicide bomber at Abbey Gate at Kabul Air Force Air Base airport that day. In addition to other dozens wounded, some grievously for life. But it's the perception. It was the perception given to the entire world at that time, again, August 2021, that the Biden administration was weak, incompetent, and that they could be taken advantage of. And what followed thereafter, very quickly thereafter, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In February of 2022. Now, that, of course, wasn't their first invasion. That invasion began back in 2014. But beyond that earlier invasion of the Donbass, this was a whole, forces invasion in 2022. And then, of course, go to the Middle East. Look at, the Hamas invasion in February. In October last year of 2023 of Israel. Look at the menacing maneuvers and threats of the Chinese communist regime against Taiwan. All over the world, the perception is the United States is AWOL, is weak, is bent on the most important objective is don't escalate. Don't anybody escalate.
No,
and
you know that
objective, they're going to be taken advantage of, and that's what's
was
going
it Carl Rumsfeld, who he said something very perceptive once, very, very correct. He said that weakness is provocation.
on. Yeah, Donald Rumsfeld, our former defense secretary.
Donald Rumsfeld, yeah. I'm from the third world, and I mean, I come from a mixed background, so half my family looks like me, half my family looks like you. That's just how that is. But from a third world mind perspective, tolerance, weakness is provocation. In fact, it invites predation.
Yes.
And I think Westerners don't appreciate that. I mean, I live in two minds simultaneously. I see the world because I could have been a victim, so therefore I have to know, I have to understand that mindset because I'm potentially at risk from it. So I understand that mindset, and that is provocation, and that for me is worrisome. And sometimes the only way to avert that is to stand up and be strong and be very clear. There will be consequences. So I find that really unfortunate. Also, story, when I was in the Middle East, I was in northern Iraq in Kurdistan, and we were about 20 kilometers from the ISIS front line. And I was speaking with the defense minister of Kurdistan, and I was building a system for one of the airports and some barracks because they were having problems. Obama accidentally dropped a number of weapons pallets onto the ISIS positions. And of course, the Kurds thought that Obama was a joke, right? In fact, a lot of the Arabs, they loved Donald Trump. He was strong, and they thought Obama was a clown. I mean, just telling you what I was hearing when I was on the ground there. And and I was like, how many times can you accidentally drop weapons, missiles, bombs, guns, grenades, targeting systems accidentally on the ISIS position? Directly, pinpoint. It's like, and then of course, this money that has what $240 million that accidentally went to the Taliban because they made an accounting error. Do you find that these are maybe an inside job, or is there an affinity or sympathy? I mean, are these accidents? Are these legitimate accidents? Because I find it hard to believe that.
I think some of it is probably incompetence, yes. But other parts of it, for example, the channeling of these millions and millions of dollars to Afghanistan, which is today, of course, since 2021, ruled by the Taliban, that's not a mistake. That is some sort of effort at appeasement. And again, just as you're saying, Lloyd, I think too many of our leadership, certainly here in the United States, do not understand the Islamic jihad mentality. They operate out of a Judeo-Christian basis of cultural civilizational understanding, because that's who we are, but that's not who they are. And they fail to take that difference into account
Yeah.
and think if we are just nice enough to them and provide humanitarian aid, then they'll change their ways and become,
No,
liberal, democratic, Thomas Jeffersonian type of
no, that's reality denial. They need to understand different cultures have different moral systems, different ethics. They have different value systems, completely antithetical value systems, and it's hard to make that point. But the everyone is the same idea is completely false.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So the Afghanistan withdrawal was really a signal of weakness, and this has invited predation. This has invited. I mean, yeah, you've seen threats rise. Is there? Just curious. I mean, I'd love to come over and vote for Donald Trump, but I guess you know, I'd be blocked at the border. I'd be turned back for whatever reasons because I'd be voting the wrong way. But that said, what do you think will happen with the Trump administration? How would he reverse this? How would he change things?
Well, I mean, very quickly, he would take a number of steps. Number one will be closing our southern border and stopping the flow of millions of illegal aliens into our country, among which certainly must have been at least hundreds of jihadis, as well as Chinese jungle tigers,
Hmm.
traffickers, human traffickers, narco traffickers, child traffickers, cartels, and gang members. Stop that. That, I think, will be day one, as he has said repeatedly.
Hmm.
It will also change the way that our economy is run. In particular, will open back up energy production in this country.
Hmm.
As he keeps saying at his rallies, drill, baby, drill. And
Hmm.
that alone will not only assist our own economy, because everything in our economy at its base relies on energy to fuel the trucks, the planes, and whatever else transports our goods. Never mind at the gas pump for the ordinary American. So that will not only assist us, but also by lowering the global price of oil in that way with our production, will take away a windfall for regimes like Iran's and Russia's, which will then curtail of necessity, some of their aggressive activities, be it in Ukraine or be it funding jihadi proxies across the Middle East, Hamas, which is almost done for anyway, but Hezbollah, militias in
Hmm.
Judea and Samaria, Houthis, and so forth. So I think those will be maybe the most important and the most immediate of steps that a re-elected President Donald Trump would take.
Right. Yeah, I have a question. That the Germans, I mean, they've effectively sunk their energy industry. So they've shuttered something like 15 nuclear power stations, which is the cheapest and most efficient and cleanest power we have. Right now, now they're relying on unreliable energy, unreliables, as I prefer to call them, and they can no longer power heavy industry. Now, Poland is considering building a nuclear power station, and for Poland, that's a strategic decision because they can then start to actually take away a lot of the heavy industry from Germany and create jobs here and start building their economy as an industrial economy. But the Germans have insisted on feeding the dragon, being Russia, by buying their oil and gas. And even now, there were reports of they were back channeling some of this oil and gas, despite the fact that they should be buying this from the US. And of course, Biden has basically nearly destroyed the energy exports industry in the US. I mean, is this naivete? Is this a sort of willful collaboration? Are there elements that are fighting with each other? Are there just to try and make sense of this mess? Why would Germany fund a threat that would eventually, and that has, I believe, Putin has said he wants to restore the old Soviet borders, and the Poles, their policy is that Russia is coming west, not won't. Well, for Poland, since at least 2014, the view is that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and Poland is getting ready for that fight. So why is Germany, why France so naive in giving money to Russia to fund Russia's ability to conduct warfare against the same people that are funding them?
Well, it's hard to understand. No more than it's hard to understand why any of these places in the UK and others have allowed themselves to be overrun by hordes of illegal aliens coming from places that essentially want to destroy their civilization. Why would any society willingly, deliberately commit suicide? Hard to understand, but points to Poland for thinking it through correctly and realizing that dependence on energy supplies out of the Russian Federation is not really that great of an idea. But this also then will open up possibilities for other opportunities. For example, when Israel begins to fully exploit its natural gas resources in the huge fields underneath the Mediterranean Sea, build the pipelines that will connect all of that to Europe, and as
Mm-hmm.
well for the United States to export once we begin to develop and produce energy once again, to export liquid natural gas across the Atlantic to potential customers there in Europe. All kinds of alternative opportunities are going to be opened up. When misguided policies at these national levels, France, Germany, cripple those economies, other alternatives become suggested.
Right. In the UK, I mean, we've been looking at what's happening in the UK, and that is, it's become airstrip one. I mean, I think that much is pretty clear right now. You know what airstrip one is, right? That's the reference to Orwell's 1984, where we've always been at war with East Asia, I believe it was. So, I mean, it's become that dictatorship, that dystopian dictatorship in many ways, and it's creeping up on us. Um, and you've got people people are seeing a distinct two-tier policing system, a two-tier judiciary. You've got Muslims running wild, rioting, killing, carrying weapons which are illegal, and they're treated with kid gloves for the most part. And then you've got people that are angry about what's happening, and these people are demonized. These individuals who are grieving, who are angry about the loss of their jobs, the destruction of their communities, their culture, their cultural symbols, by what looks to them like a takeover and like preferential treatment for a hostile foreign alien group. And of course, the state has clearly set its preference for these hostile aliens and demonized and called their own people the far right. I mean, the EDL, which hasn't existed for 10 years, and now I'm the far right now. Um, Families that are grieving are the far right, people that just want to maintain their culture. All cultures are good: white culture, British culture, Western culture, Christian culture, bad. I mean, this seems like an all-out assault, an attack on this culture. without dialogue, there's going to be violence. I mean, where do you think this is going to go? And is this part of this Muslim Brotherhood plan? Is this part of the cultural warfare that they spoke about? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think look at the pushback that is already occurring in numbers of European countries. Anything from Giorgia Meloni's Fratelli d'Italia party coalition government that was elected some years ago now. Other elections more recently to the European Parliament, in which conservative and populist parties like Marine Le Pen's National Rally, in English, they'll say Rassemblement National in French, or the German Alternative für Deutschland, scored numbers of seats in the European Parliament. Other places too. There's a pushback that's happening. Certainly what we see going on in Britain, the people on the streets after the murder of those 3 little girls and injured several more, they've had it. Many of these populations have just had it, and they are pushing back, whether through elections and unfortunately now on the streets as well. And I think we're going to see more of that.
Elections haven't been effective, though. For instance, Marine Le Pen was going to win in a landslide, but of course, through whatever political chicanery, they were able to unseat her to a large degree. And of course, I think she'll win certainly in the next one.
Yeah, why they're taking to the streets now.
Correct. And then in Britain, you had the lowest voter turnout in decades. You also had the incumbent, well, the party that's currently ruling had a very small minority of votes, and they had like 5 million seats, whereas a party that had half that number of votes, that's the party under just Nigel Farage, they had like 5 seats, even though they collected millions of votes, nearly 5 million votes. The other party had something like 9 million, and they had 30 times the number of seats. I mean, they've got a really unfair representation in Parliament. The British system is this first past the post is clearly not serving the people. But so voting is not working. People are saying, hey, look, these Muslims riot, BLM riots, as you say, Red-Green Axis, Red-Green Alliance. They riot, they use violence, they use threats, they use coercion. They get their way. What's good for the goose may be good for the gander. Do you think that this is where we're headed? Because voting doesn't seem to work. Violence seems to work.
Well, where the popular vote has not succeeded, we see, unfortunately, people taking to the streets, and I think we'll see more of that. But I don't think that we should discount the voting either. I mean, Macron's party in France had to dissolve parliament in the wake of the European Union Parliament elections. There are still effects of the populist movement from elections, and there will be more. But in the meantime, flashpoints like, as we mentioned, the murder of those little girls in Britain, have brought people into the streets, and that will increase more and more as well. I'm afraid that's what we're looking at.
Are we looking at a Lebanon situation? Because Lebanon, for me, was an eye-opener when I was there. I've been through Lebanon. I've traveled most of the country. I've been to the Bekaa Valley. And they brought in the Palestinians. And of course, the Palestinians have always betrayed their host country. They've always tried to overthrow the government. And of course, this turned the only Christian country in the Middle East is now effectively a Muslim country, and under the thumb of Hezbollah and these Gazans. Are we looking at potential civil war? Are we looking at low-grade civil conflict? Are we looking at these occasional flare-ups? Are you looking at people forming little enclaves? And what is the place here of mass deportations? Do we think the political will is there? Because I think the public will is there, but you can't say these things. That marks you as racist.
Well, certainly in the Netherlands, for example, where the Freedom Party of Geert Wilders scored big election wins the last time, although he is not the prime minister, but is certainly a key member of the coalition government there now. They are pledged to deportations. And we've talked about, of course, the United States as well. And one of the key promises of candidate former president, future president perhaps, Donald Trump, is that he will, upon taking office again, begin one of the largest mass deportation programs of illegal aliens since our former president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, did this back in the 1950s.
What happened back then? Tell me more, please.
A big deportation of illegals. And that's going
I
to
didn't
happen.
know that. So yeah, you just surprised me. So the political will was there. Do you think we'll get back to that point where people say enough is enough? Here's
It's
our line.
happening.
This is our culture. This
It's
is our
already
land.
happening. I mean, I don't want to see the violence, on the streets as in Britain in recent days. No, nobody wants to see that. But to avoid that, there has to be rule of law, and the laws on the books, whether it be in Britain, whether it be in the United States or elsewhere, the laws must be followed, and they haven't been. Certainly here in the United States, under the Biden administration, we have a law in our books called 8 U.S. Code 1325. It is the law that governs
Hmm.
illegal aliens and what is to be done with them when they commit the criminal misdemeanor of crossing our border without authorization, proper authorization. Those laws have to be fulfilled. We have a clause in our Constitution. It is Article 2, Section 3, where it says the president shall ensure the laws be faithfully executed. That's part of our Constitution. Not been followed, has it? So we have to return to that. We have to return, whether here in Britain, elsewhere in Europe, to rule of law. And that means holding accountable those who break those laws.
It's amazing because my perception is that these laws are not being enforced and these cultural values, the Western values, are not being protected because those in charge clearly see those values as harmful, as
Well,
pernicious.
or they see them as detrimental to their own reelection prospects, shall we say.
Fair enough. I mean, I just find it strange. Did you think that the media clearly is swayed on one side, heavily biased on one side, and you get this feeling that gay people are 98.2% of the population, then you've got another 1.7% that are transgender, and there's maybe 0.1% that are heterosexual. I mean, that's the perception you get from reading the papers,
Well,
right?
certainly in the United States, the majority of our media are leftist, but there are still some very respectable outlets on the right, or at least doing credible, objective journalism.
Hmm.
Breitbart comes to mind. The Epoch
Yep.
Times comes to mind. Newsmax comes to mind, and a few others. One America News
One
comes to
American
mind.
News, yeah. I watch One America and Epoch Times. I have a subscription, and Newsmax I watch as well. I subscribe on YouTube. Yeah.
So there's still hope, but you're right, that an awful lot of our media, certainly I can speak for the United States, are skewed very unobjectively towards the left.
Yeah. I'm just curious, when you look at socialism, socialism, at least in the West, expresses itself along with, shall we say, sexual immorality. The two go linked. I mean, you got this perversion. So socialism and sexual perversion go hand in hand in the West. And then you've got Islam, and the two are working together. And Islam has its own, shall we say, issues with sexual transgressions. Let's not get too much into that right now. But most of this is something that is something Islam would otherwise violently react against.
Well, one of
I
the
mean,
funniest things, yeah, I mean, absolutely, when you see on our streets or on our campuses, queers for Hamas or gays
chickens for
for Hamas,
KFC.
you can only, oh dear, what are they teaching these poor children at our universities? Somebody put it perfectly, I think, and it's how does it go? Chickens for KFC. If you know, Kentucky Fried Chicken is one of our fast food outlets here in the United States. Chickens for KFC. That's about the
Yeah,
size of it.
yeah. I
Because of
just find
course,
it really
under
strange.
Islamic law, being homosexual, not even doing anything, being homosexual is a death penalty crime. It is one of the 7 hudud, crimes and punishments. But apparently the kids with the gays for Gaza don't really know that.
Yeah, what are our options? How can we deal with this? I mean, what do we do? Citizen journalism. I think people have lost faith in most mainstream media. I still watch a lot of Fox News. I find there's a lot of good reporting there. I find there's lots of, say, One America, Epoch Times, and so on. Um, but people have lost trust. Now you're looking at the rise of citizen journalism. If you have a phone, you can be a journalist. If you're on Twitter, Twitter's become X under Elon Musk has become the most popular news site in most countries. It's where news breaks. It's where news is disseminated. It's where the conversation is happening. So politically, it's massively influential. How can we, as individuals, I'm growing my audience. My audience is growing well. I'm trying to put out some objective, well-researched information. What can we do to try to counter this on our own? I mean, we're made to feel alone. We're made to feel as if, I mean, heterosexual, well, just being heterosexual seems to be, now they're trying to make that abnormal. Having a family makes you far right. Wanting to protect your kids and your borders and your culture makes you far right, which effectively they're saying Nazi, right? And they're trying to criminalize just being a normal human being.
Yeah.
How do we fight back against that? Yeah.
I only have a couple minutes before I have to
Sure.
jump to another interview, but
Right.
I would say very quickly, I think people should be on social media, time permitting, and if if that's something you feel comfortable doing. I myself, I'm on Twitter, I'm on
Mm-hmm.
Truth Social, Facebook, and Telegram. Contribute to those fora if that is something you want to do. You can call in to radio stations, TV channels that have that feature for callers to call into programs, for
Right.
example.
Okay. So we
Op-ed
should
in your
participate.
hometown newspaper or wherever you'd like to publish.
Okay.
People can be both educated about these things and engaged as patriotic citizens.
Right. I have two last questions, and since I know your time is limited, two things. Qatar is a puppet master that is managing so many things, so heavily involved with Hamas and Iran and funding things and accommodating these people in their country. So the second question is, what is the risk, the nuclear threat from Iran? So the question is, Qatar, can you tell us in like 2 minutes, Qatar, your thoughts and the
Qatar is
nuclear risk?
massively influential because of its funding, because of its oil wealth, which allows it to fund universities, colleges, and think tanks across the West, certainly here in the United States. For example, a branch campus of the Brookings Institute is located in Doha, Qatar. So it's the use of its vast oil wealth to fund Muslim Brotherhood uh, issues, causes.
Subversion.
Yeah. So yeah. So sorry I have to rush. But I will have to jump, and I will look forward to another opportunity to come back on your show, Lloyd, because there's obviously so much more we could talk about.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for allowing me to throw these questions at you. These were audience questions and pressing issues.
Sure.
Iran, I'd love to speak at length about Iran, but thank you very much, Claire. This has been an honor and it's been a great pleasure. So yeah, thank you, and we shall hopefully see you again
Thank you
soon.
very much. And sorry to
Take care.
those questions we did not get to. We'll get to them next time.
No, we did most of them. I appreciate that. It's been fantastic. It's been
Good,
a
good.
great education for us all. Take care, Claire. Bye
Okay,
bye.
thanks, Lloyd.
So thanks all. I will see you all soon. I hope that's been an education. Hope you've learned something. I will ask Claire to come back, so give me a month or so. I'm also trying to set up a discussion with Gurmit Singh. I'm talking to him tomorrow so that we can arrange a time for us to bring him on for an interview. He was one of the original founders of the EDL and a little bit of a checkered past, but someone who's got fantastic on the ground knowledge, someone who understands the issues, who's been there from the beginning with Tommy Robinson. And I'd love to bring him on to speak about the issues that affect the UK and get a clear, unfiltered, honest view on this issue, because clearly we have to be aware of these issues and we have to know what we can do. And yeah, speak about these things, get on social media, vote, get involved in your school councils. Your churches are being infiltrated. Your school councils are being infiltrated. Your city councils could get involved, local level, local elections, get involved, deal with things, and speak up, speak out. Do not let them silence you. So take care, guys. God bless.